Well, thank you so much, Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to speak again to Bill C-35. As I said in my previous speech on this bill, no parent is perfect. I can attest to that firsthand. I make lots and lots of parenting mistakes. But parents are the best proxy decision makers for their children because parents have a deep and natural love for their children. And this love that parents have for their kids generally ensures a rectitude of intention. Rectitude of intention means that parents always want what's best for their children. If they make mistakes, they at least do so from a place of love, wanting to give their children the very best that they can. I trust parents to make decisions for and about their children. There are, of course, extreme cases in which external authorities have to take over parental decision-making, but the possibility of these extreme and rare exceptional cases should not be used to justify a general policy of having the state interpose itself between children and their parents. Because while the state can aspire to a kind of general goodwill for all people, this general goodwill is nothing compared to the fierce and natural love that leads parents to always want the best for their children. And before I come to the particulars of the child care issue, I want to say that we are seeing broader challenges in many areas to the idea that parents should be trusted to shape the direction of their own families. We see movements to have teachers, school counselors, and therapists facilitate dramatic and potentially irreversible changes in the lives of young people without the inclusion of parents. In fact, with the explicit exclusion of parents. Why does anyone want to exclude parents from important conversations about the lives of their children? Parents love their children and want the best for their children. Of course, parents make mistakes, but someone motivated by deep love is less likely to make mistakes and certainly quicker to correct their mistakes than an official institutional bureaucracy driven by politics and constrained by inertia. That is why everything that happens in a school, in a child care center, or in any out-of-home program should happen in the context of an openness to conversation with parents. I remember my parents telling me as a child, if anyone tells you not to tell mommy or daddy something, make sure you tell us right away. That is still very good advice. This country has a history of parental alienation, of a state bureaucracy taking children away from their parents in an explicit effort to disconnect them from the culture and values of their families. This was wrong. And today I'm hearing from families, most recently especially from Muslim families, who are concerned about parents not being included in conversations about how the state and state institutions are relating to their children. This is something that we have to be vigilant about. And going forward, Conservatives will always stand on the side of parental choice and on the side of not excluding parents from important conversations that impact the lives of their children. Because the role of the family is at the heart of a conservative belief in the importance of subsidiarity. The federal government should not stick their nose into the business of the province, and neither the federal government nor the provincial government should stick their nose into what is properly the business of the family. In our federation, this constant sticking of noses into other people's business has led to redundant and inefficient expenditures in many areas and has obscured what should be clear lines of accountability. On the point of parents and parental involvement in the lives of children, I noted one line in particular from the minister's speech about this child care program. It was a quotation from someone else that she read, but a quotation that I think she read approvingly. She said of these programs, "They are shaping our little people into what they are going to be in the future." Again, they are shaping our little people into what they are going to be in the future. And I think that is undoubtedly true. Part of the reason why parents want to choose so judiciously what child care options they select is because child care providers do play a role in shaping critical aspects of how a child sees the world. All education is informed in some way by underlying worldview. There is no such thing as value-neutral education. So parents will generally want to pursue an alignment between the values they are teaching at home and the values that are being promoted in programs outside the home. So when the range of options is narrowed, it becomes harder and harder for parents to find that alignment. Choice and flexibility in childcare makes it easier for parents to find programs that facilitate a good alignment between childcare provider and family. Parents should have an opportunity to seek to pass their core beliefs on to their children. Of course, children grow up And there is a natural process of children being exposed as they grow more and more, exposed to more of the world, and in due course coming to their own distinct conclusions on things. That was certainly my experience growing up. But parents can and should provide and be able to provide an intellectual foundation which allows a child to know where they come from and to receive the wisdom of those who love them most and best. In my last speech, I focused on the practical and economic arguments for choice in childcare. But there is more to it than just that. I believe that parents should be able to make decisions about the kinds of childcare arrangements that's best aligned with the economic and practical needs of their family. But even more importantly, I believe in choice in childcare because I believe in respecting the role of parents making choices about how they will seek to train children in virtues, traditions, and practices that are particular to their family. A child should begin life knowing and growing upon the firm ground of their family, and this requires that parents are able to shape the environments that their children are in. Now, having said that, I'd like to shift to another point, that of workforce participation. This has come up a few times in different ways in different speeches that have been given tonight. Liberals champion as a feature of this plan that it will increase workforce participation by increasing the cost that taxpayers pay and channeling those dollars into a particular model of out-of-home childcare. This puts more financial pressure on families who do not use the state system and therefore likely forces some of them to opt to enter the workforce. By taxing all and subsidizing some, this approach tips the scales in a certain direction. And I think the argument goes, this tipping of the scale leads to higher levels of workforce participation, which is identified as one of the goals. Now, our preferred policy is one that supports families without tipping the scale. That is, it finds ways of supporting families that does not involve the arbitrary redistribution of resources among families based on their different childcare choices. Now, on the issue of workforce participation, I want to clarify an important distinction. So, workforce participation measures the proportion of people who want to work, while the employment rate measures the proportion of those people who are actually working. So, a person who chooses not to work is not considered unemployed. They are considered not in the labor force. A person is considered unemployed if they are in the labor force, that is, if they wish to work, but they are not able to find a job. Again, a person is not in the workforce if they are choosing not to be in the workforce, and a person is unemployed if they are choosing to be in the workforce, wanting to work, but not able to find a job. Clearly, we should seek to minimize the unemployment rate. That is, we should seek to have as low as possible the number of people who want to work and are not working. We want as high unemployment rate as possible. But it is not obvious to me that we should always aim for the highest possible workforce participation rate. There are many good and legitimate reasons why a person might choose not to be in the workforce. Because they are studying, because they are retired, because they are of sufficient means and would rather spend their time volunteering, or because they are attending to the needs of their family. All of these are, of course, forms of work, but they do not formally count as being in the workforce. That is, they are not forms of work that are commodified. There is nothing wrong with people making these kinds of choices to opt out of the workforce. We should not be so narrowly mercantile as to suppose that the only way for a person to live a good and productive life is by generating income and paying taxes. Rather, we should focus on the advancement of overall happiness and well-being, on the discovery of the true, the good, and the beautiful, on facilitating this by trying to build a society in which people have the prosperity and the freedom to make their own happiness and well-being maximizing choices. I do not see any reason why we should set as a goal of public policy achieving the greatest possible participation in the formal workforce. If someone has well-considered reasons for not working inside the formal commodified marketplace, such as the ones described earlier, I do not see a problem. Why should the state seek to push or incentivize someone to move in a different direction than they wish to go when it comes to workforce participation? Ideally, I would like to see people be able to study if and when they want, to take time off work if and when they want, to retire if and when they want, and to stay home with their children if and when they want. For plenty of practical reasons, this is not always the case, and personal preference is not the only factor that shapes our lives. But why should the state aim for the highest possible labor participation rate by increasing taxes and subsidizing those choices that involve higher workforce participation? Why tip the scale in this direction? I think the state should aim to allow people to make their own choices, presumably choices which they believe will maximize the happiness of themselves and their families. If a woman or a man, having the means to do so and with a view to their own assessment of what is best for their family, decides that they want to work part-time or not work at all for a period of time for the sake of being with their children or for some other purpose, I do not understand why we in the House of Commons should presume to tell them that there is something wrong with that choice. Nor should we in the House of Commons presume to tell a dual-income family that there is anything wrong with their choice. But the government's policy is to use higher taxes to subsidize certain kinds of families, making certain kinds of childcare choices over others. Increasing taxes to subsidize certain kinds of choices over others does not advance freedom or choice. The Conservative policy of offering direct support to families allowed parents to have the means to freely make their own choices, motivated by love for their children and unfettered by economic coercion. Support for all families without tipping the scale. But regardless of the particulars of the childcare policy, nobody has made the argument, as far as I have heard in this place, that higher workforce participation is a good in and of itself. Presumably, existing retirement and post-secondary support programs are an acknowledgement that higher workforce participation is not always desirable. If the government canceled existing retirement supports, then I suspect workforce participation would go up. But this would still be a bad policy, because it would limit the ability of the retirees to choose to leave the commodified workforce during their golden years. Now, of course, there's a gender dimension to this workforce participation discussion. Statistics suggest that women are more likely to opt out of the workforce for some portion of their child-raising years. I suspect we would find that women are also more likely to opt out of the workforce for post-secondary education, since right now women are attending university at much higher rates than men. And certainly we should seek to ensure that all people are able to make their choices freely without any kind of coercion, regardless of the reasons why or the circumstances in which they're wanting to opt out of the workforce. We should seek to maximize choice and flexibility for everyone. But it seems to me to be grossly paternalistic for the state to presume some kind of false consciousness operating in the choices that many women make in this respect. The state should seek to promote prosperity and freedom. How people then choose to use that prosperity and freedom, inside or outside the workforce, should not be the business of the state. Now, Madam Speaker, I think I have about 4 minutes till the House adjourns for the evening, and I'll look forward to resuming the last few minutes of my remarks when this debate is picked up. But I want at this point to just highlight some of the key points I've made previously in this debate. Number one, that this bill substantively does nothing other than establish an advisory council. All of the agreements are already in place, and this bill is merely a sort of an act of self-congratulations by the government. But they have put in place a system that is not effectively achieving its own stated goals. In fact, what we see with the current system is that by subsidizing childcare, but not in fact sufficiently to align with the promises that they have made, and at the same time by regulating prices, they have put a great deal of strain on childcare providers. And the people you would expect to be most enthusiastic about this program, childcare providers, have actually been in many cases the most vocal in expressing concerns about it. Because what they're saying is the combination of the subsidies at the level they are with the price regulation, it makes it very difficult for childcare operators to invest in and grow their business and offer those additional spaces over time. So I think what we are seeing is a kind of ticking time bomb created in the system. That is, the government is over-promising while they are imposing enormous strains on those who are actually providing childcare services. So I would say to parents, even parents who may feel that they're benefiting in the short term because there are some families that have seen reductions in their costs, while many families are still on waiting lists. Many families are paying higher taxes because of this government. But even those who are experiencing short-term reductions in cost, I would warn them that the structural damage the government is doing to the childcare system by putting strains on childcare providers is not going to allow childcare to deliver in the long term. One of the speakers on the government side said this is about establishing a generational long-term promise. Not at all. What the government is doing is using deficit spending to underfund while over-promising childcare operators who now face enormous strain, who can't bring in new staff, who can't expand, and they are creating a system that is simply not going to work over the long term. It's not going to be fulfilling the promises that they've made, and we've seen this in many aspects of this government's record, is the over-promising and the under-delivering. And I would encourage those who are thinking about and following this debate to listen to childcare providers, to hear from those who are working in the system. Now, when we've raised these concerns with the minister, she said, "Oh, why are you so negative? These conservatives, they're always criticizing. They're so negative about the things we're trying to do." And I think our job in this place, Madam Speaker, is to tell the truth. And if telling the truth about the trajectory of government policy involves pointing out that there are flaws, there are risks, and we hear this accusation a lot from the government, by the way. A couple of years ago, when our leader was talking about how overspending was going to lead to inflation, they said, "Oh, you're being so negative," but it was true. It was true. And we will continue to speak truth to power and highlight the problems of the childcare approach. Thank you.